Let's say you think of an amazing three-act story that you want to create.
Yeah. I just had an idea.
The first question you have to ask yourself is, what do you make? Should your story be written as a movie or a novel? It's a simple question, but the answer gets complicated because of how often stories get retold in different art forms. The majority of highest-grossing and most critically acclaimed movies were adapted from novels, and many unforgettable stories became famous both as a novel and as a film. But each of these stories is presented differently depending on the medium used. So what's the difference between telling a story through a film and through a novel? What can a novel convey well that a film may have trouble with? When I was in high school, I read How to Write a Movie in 21 Days. The first chapter of the book provides an interesting thought experiment to consider the differences between a novel and a screenplay. The experiment asks you to think of a scene and write that scene both as a novel and as a movie. Consider a scene where a robber breaks into a home to steal something. In a novel, we may get the inner thoughts of the robber before the robbery. The robber and his predicament gets described to us using various literary devices. After a slight hesitation, the robber concluded he had no other option, and with a shaking hand, he lifted the hammer and smashed the window, shattering both the glass and his expectations for a quiet life free of criminal record. But alas, in an instant he became a part of the statistic. Where the novel stands out is its ability to put us in the thoughts and perspective of a character so smoothly. Of course, movies do the same thing. Movies narrate, have voiceovers, and even talk directly to the viewer, but the novel can transition from thought to action so seamlessly to the point where the vast majority of some novels can take place completely within the mind of a character and the story can remain gripping and moving. In movies, action is more common than just thinking.
Alright, you just need to calm down. We need to think for a second. We just need to think this out.
Fuck thinking, we need to act!
It's rare for a movie to spend the whole time narrating because it would get boring, but novels are different. Instead of showing a character, a novel completely inhabits the mind of a character and the world of the narrative. Novels can tell us how a person is feeling, tell us what something looks like or what something tastes like, in a way a movie has trouble with. Catcher in the Rye wouldn't work very well as a movie because movies are best at showing action and movement. The vast majority of Catcher in the Rye takes place inside the mind of Holden, and little action occurs as Holden ponders. So when a scene consists of nothing but Holden sitting on a train thinking, the novel is the best method for bringing Holden's thoughts and character to life. While there are definitely good movies that showcase a character's thoughts, novels do it better. In the adaptation of The Hunger Games from novel to the big screen, the writers had to do away with a lot of what was going on inside Katniss's head because it didn't transition well to screen. When she's in The Hunger Games, Katniss has to fake a romance with Peeta to win affection from the viewers, and in the first two books, she constantly thinks about Gale back home and has an inner struggle about whether or not she likes Peeta or Gale. The movies almost entirely do away with this plotline in the earlier films because it's really awkward adding a love triangle to a film that has no action associated with it. Movies aren't good at thoughts, they're good at actions. The Great Gatsby film adaptation has several differences with the novel, and it capitalizes on what movies do better than books. They show. To showcase Gatsby's anxiety towards seeing Daisy, he orders a ridiculous amount of flowers for the house and hires dozens of servants to redecorate Nick's lawn. The visuals show us Gatsby's over-preparation and anxiety from seeing Daisy. The scene of him waiting for Daisy has the ever-increasing volume of the time ticking in the background as we get closer and closer to the clock.
I can't wait all day. I'm leaving.
Along with DiCaprio's performance, all the elements of the scene, the editing, sound, visuals, and acting, convey the sense of anxiety Gatsby has. The novel does it a little bit differently. The novel has no flowers delivered, and only one of Gatsby's servants comes to mow the lawn. Instead of representing nerves through big visuals, we get told about Gatsby's nerves through literary devices. I went out and opened it. Gatsby, pale as death, with his hands plunged like weights in his coat pockets, was standing in a puddle of water glaring tragically into my eyes. Both scenes are written very similarly, with almost the same dialogue and action, but the subtle differences between the movie's visuals and the novel's descriptions are how two different art forms convey the same mood. The novel tells us about his nerves through description, and the movie shows us his nerves through editing, lighting, sound, and acting. So what would a robbery look like as a movie? To play to the strengths of film when it comes to conveying the robber's hesitation and regret, we would show rather than tell. Maybe we'd get a close-up of his trembling hand or sweat on his brow. Maybe he'd be dressed in everyday attire instead of the typical robber gear. The shots could be close-ups and point-of-view shots to place us into his perspective and empathize with him. And the shots could be edited very quickly to up the pace and anxiety of the scene. These visuals are what would make the story powerful. For the novel, metaphors, tone, hyperbole, and all the other countless literary techniques are the key to telling a story. And lighting, camera angle, actor placement, and other cinematic techniques are how movies show a story. Different techniques with different strengths and weaknesses. Movies show, novels tell. Many people on the internet loathe movies that don't stay true to the novels they're based on. There are a lot of reasons for the changes from novel to screen, like fitting feature-length screen time and a desire to appeal to a larger audience, but I think one key difference some people miss is that movies can't always replicate the mood of a novel because movies have to present the story with different techniques. Perhaps The Great Gatsby wasn't a good adaptation because it focused too heavily on the visuals of the story and not the emotion behind it. Take this excerpt from the novel. "But I didn't call to him, for he gave a sudden intimation that he was content to be alone. He stretched out his arms toward the dark water in a curious way, and far as I was from him, I could have sworn he was trembling." That moment is recreated in the movie like this.
He seemed to be reaching towards something out there in the dark.
The movie doesn't come close to capturing this moment correctly. In the novel, Gatsby can be seen trembling even from a distance with both arms stretched out. It's obviously a very personal moment for Gatsby, where he looks extremely desperate, almost pathetic, with such dramatic body posture. In the movie, he just does this. No trembling, just one arm. Not embarrassing, not intimate. It's completely casual. It misses the whole point of the scene. It's supposed to be a very uncomfortable moment to see Gatsby's desperate and weak side, but the movie recreates this moment totally wrong. The movie's visuals made Gatsby look so cool and his life so dazzling that we miss how he's not just a cool rich guy with a weakness for a girl. He's actually an extremely empty, hollow failure that's anything from great. The movie's visuals, along with the modern score, made Gatsby's character much less moving and pathetic like the novel did, so sometimes the movie gets it wrong. But there are many more examples where the movie does it right, and maybe even better. What better way to show the glamour of a foreign world than to go from a world in black and white to a world in color? What better way to show a narrator dominating the scene than by having him look straight at us and introduce us to the world himself? What I'm saying is that for every poor adaptation, there are dozens of examples proving otherwise. Many stories work very well on screen and off, so I don't think movie adaptations of a book are cursed to be worse than the book. I just think that sometimes the filmmaker doesn't bring the emotion of the book onto the screen properly. So the next time you read a book or watch a movie, ask yourself, does it show or tell?
I know Kung Fu.
Show me.